Welcome to REEP. This is an orientation to lesson planning at REEP for teachers who are new to the program. In this orientation, we will be talking about the stages of the learning cycle and how they relate to lesson planning at REEP. You will be introduced to the REEP lesson plan template and receive important information about teacher observations. We will be using some resources from the lesson planning page on the wiki. Please find that page and print out the guided note-taking worksheet. Use the worksheet to take notes during this presentation. You probably already know a lot about lesson planning. Much of this presentation will be a review, though some of the vocabulary we use at REEP may be new to you. We think about learning as a cycle. When we are introduced to new ideas, we try to place them in the context of our previous knowledge and skills. We practice them, and then we apply them in our everyday life. During the motivation stage of the cycle, we either analyze our background experience or, in the case of something that is completely new to us, build the experience from scratch. We'll get some concrete examples of this later in the presentation. During the presentation stage, the teacher provides new information. Students have a chance to work with the new information in a variety of ways before they apply it in a real-life situation or a simulation of a real-life situation. The 4 stages of the cycle are the 4 main components of the lesson plan. While a lesson plan is usually written in a linear fashion, we like to think of it as a cycle, knowing that we can move around to the different stages as needed, even going back and forth until students are ready to apply their new knowledge and skills. Let's take a look at each stage of the lesson in detail. During the motivation stage, the teacher taps into students' background knowledge and students analyze their experiences. If students lack experience in the concept being discussed, the teacher creates the experience for the students. In this picture, you can see students carving pumpkins in preparation for doing some reading about jack-o'-lanterns. The motivation stage is about preparing students for a new concept by building on what they already know. Some examples of activities during the motivation or background building stage of the lesson include information grids, personality or habit quizzes, group or pair discussion, video clips, stories, or field trips. The presentation stage of the lesson is where the teacher provides new information. This is generally the shortest stage of the lesson. Some examples of activities and tools used during this stage of the lesson include short explanations, realia, presentations of language structures, and readings. The practice stage should be the longest section of the lesson. Students should have the opportunity to work with the new information and language in a variety of ways. A few examples of practice activities include information grids, writing activities, worksheets, songs, line dialogues, pair dictation, and close activities. Once students have become comfortable with the new information and language, they can demonstrate their comprehension and ability to use it by trying it out in a new context. Some examples of application activities include student projects, oral presentations, published writing, and unscripted role play. This is a picture of a mock election put on by level 500 and 550 students at the end of a unit on elections. It was a very large project, Most often, your application activities will be on a much smaller scale. Now it's time to take a look at the REEP lesson plan form. First, read through the lesson plan guide and the do's and don'ts for a successful lesson. Then, thinking about your class, use an objective from the work unit for your level. Think of an activity type for each stage of a lesson on that objective. Suggest a way to get students moving during the lesson. Email your suggestions to Emily. Now let's look at some lesson plans created by REEP teachers. First, review the sample plan on the wiki. Then, browse the plans on the REEP curriculum. Identify a plan you could use or adapt for one of your classes. Email Emily a link to the plan and your reason for selecting it. Teachers at REEP have an informal observation during their first cycle and a formal observation during the annual evaluation process in the spring and early summer. You may also be observed when you change levels. Observations will be conducted by the program specialist, your site coordinator, or in some cases, the instructional technology coordinator. On occasion, teachers have the opportunity to work with a peer mentor and be observed by him or her. Before your observation, you will need to email your observer a copy of your lesson plan and any relevant materials. The observer will be in your class for about an hour, and they will let you know ahead of time whether to expect them at the beginning or middle of class. Your observer will write up his or her notes using the REEP Teaching Analysis Checklist. Take a look at the checklist. You'll find it on the wiki. A day or two after the observation, you will meet with your observer to talk about the lesson. Your observer will give you a copy of the Teaching Analysis Checklist. These post-observation meetings are paid and they last about a half an hour. If you haven't already made arrangements to be observed, please contact Emily to set up your informal observation and post-observation meeting.